So hello everybody and welcome back to another tutorial. This time a simple push button for the VR template. No matter if you're using Oculus Quest, Rift S, this is basically how to create a push button to create any specific event you would like to trigger. So the idea is somebody is using your VR application and then there is a button and he's using basically the VR application. He's using his hand, the motion controller pushes the button down and then something is happening. In my specific case, I want to show an option which is in-game or inside of the experience. You push a button and then you would like to load a different level. So how do we do this? We are starting, so to speak, with a blueprint. And I want to really start from the very beginning. You can see here that I already started constructing a blueprint, but otherwise it wouldn't be a nice tutorial. You need to go through it step by step, and then you can see that it's fairly easy actually to set it up once you understand the basics, how this actually works. So when I'm starting from scratch, then I start with a new blueprint, and you can click Add New on the green button, and then also assign here a blueprint class. I also want to mention this, you can structure your own content folders as you wish. You see here there are blueprint folders. You can also then basically click here on the right mouse button, and then you find also the blueprint class here. So no matter how you do it, this is always kind of like the same. And then what you want to add is specifically an actor class. So when you click on it, it starts saying like, hey, give me a name, right? And whatever you want to do, it's totally up to you. If you're searching for something, lots of people prefer like to call it just BP for a blueprint. I usually put my initials in front of it that I can find my stuff, or as you know, Fatty Bull, right? And then I can say like, hey, this is my push button. And then I know exactly, hey, this is a Fatty Bull blueprint. You could also say like Fatty Bull BP. Then you're very specific and you have a push button. But what happens when you open this and double click it? Basically, as you can see, there is nothing else as a blueprint. It shows you here a sphere in the icon. And when you double click it, right, then you can see when you open the full blueprint editor that you have 3 tabs here. And I make this big. You see here the viewport, the construction script, and then of course the event graph. So what is basically a blueprint? I want to just say it's nothing else than a container. See it as a container. I think this helps you a lot in order to understand what it actually does and is. And once you understand this, so you feel like, okay, a container, this kind of like makes sense. What can you do with this stuff? So let me show you precisely what I was doing here. For instance, a container can be used with anything you drop into this container. And I show you here, when you go to your viewport editor and you have here, for instance, in the basics, a cube, you drag and drop this cube into your viewport, right? And then later on, you can say, hey, this specific cube I also would like to use in my viewport. So in the details panel here, you can also select then, of course, find my cube. You see here's your cube, and now you can drag and drop it into your blueprint container, right? And as you can see, it starts with a root scene. This is always on top of it. And then based on that root scene, you dropped here the cube, and the cube is popping up, and you can clearly see, aha, there is my cube. You have also all the other options. You can rotate it, you can add some materials and so on. And as you can see, if I drag and drop like a white material on the cube, here we go, a green material, it will compile the shader, and then you see there is a green material on it. When you compile it and save it, this is basically a container, nothing else. You have created your first blueprint and with the box in it, and there's nothing else. When you close the blueprint, and of course you also delete now here in the editor your box, then what, right? So a lot of people usually are getting confused and say, so what is the next step? What am I going to do with this? And I really want to go through the absolute basics that it makes sense, because you need to understand what are those things good for. So as you can see, the blueprint I just created on the Fatty Bull as you can see, it's called Fedible Blueprint Push Button. So now you see it here. It's in the Blueprints actually folder, and I can drag and drop this blueprint, which is basically a container, to my editor, right? And as you can see, this is it. So this is how you add it. You also see it here in the world outliner, and there's a blueprint, and you have all those different options again. If you double click again, it's opening the blueprint you created again. And again, this is not a level blueprint. So this is basically a blueprint on its own. It's a container. And now you can start creating whatever you would like to create. So if we want to create like a button, then I also can say, you know what, there is a sphere, but I want to have this sphere, of course, also in my blueprint. So I click again here and drag and drop this sphere, which is the geometry, the static mesh, into my blueprint. Bring it here into my blueprint and then bring it on top. And now you can see when you basically compile and save, then you can clearly see that it's changing and updating that blueprint. Because whatever you add here in the blueprint, it will be visible then in the editor as long as this blueprint is actually added to the editor. So now, understanding this, that you can control whatever is inside of this container, inside of your blueprint, it probably makes a little bit more sense how to operate it and how to use it. Now, what else we would like to do? If we want to add a push button, you want to basically add an event, a collision or whatever, and the system has to understand, has to know, like when somebody clicks this button, it should go down, it should go up, a little animation should happen, and then something should happen. It should trigger an event, right? So to do this, the first step is you need to add an interactive collision element, right? So when you click now on the components here and you search for all different options and components, you can search here for instance, a sphere collision, right? So if you add this spherical collision, you can see it gives you a radius, and you want to make sure that it has the same radius like your sphere. And then here is where you can change the radius. That means if somebody is pushing this button, it will react to that sphere, okay? So always compile and save, and now you see that this blueprint, this container, whatever you construct over here, is basically also active in your viewport, okay? So what are we doing next? I mean, we basically set up kind of like a blueprint with some primitive objects in it, and we have a collision, but nothing else is actually done when it comes to the gameplay. Because of course, if you want to run this game, and especially here in VR, you need to make sure that something is going to be triggered or something is going to happen, right? So in the event graph is where the magic happens, when you jump over here, where you could, or not just could, where you can actually add all those functions, the triggering, the events, whatever you want to call it, right? So if we want to add now something, what is the next step? So the next step is very clear. You want to give the collision object an event, saying like, whenever something is colliding with your collision object, then you want to trigger an event. So again, you can see here, you can on the left side always select what's inside of your blueprint, and then on the right side you see all the details and the parameters. You can see here is the cube. I can see basically the name of my cube. I can see categories, transform nodes, sockets, materials, the mesh, physics, collisions, and so on. And you can see this also for the sphere. And of course, you have different parameters also depending on the objects and the components you are throwing into your blueprint. And this is, for instance, a collision object, and it has different parameters. But what you want to trigger now is, of course, an event. That means whenever anything is colliding, you want to start something. And I basically make this large here as well. You can always drag the tabs here so you can see everything. And in this particular case, again, select the sphere, the spherical trigger collision, okay? And let's call it collision. So you later on, it's more clear for you. And this is actually the spherical button You can also say like sphere button and name it so that you have a better understanding later on when it gets a little bit more complex, that you know exactly what you picked. But now if you click on the collision, you can go to the events and then you can say, wait a minute, on component begin overlap. That means if something overlaps with this collision object, no matter what it is, I wanna create an event. Now you click this green button here, and what happens is it automatically switches from basically the viewport tab, right? So you see it here, over to the event graph. And then when the event graph basically starts, it starts immediately with this event. On component begin overlap. You can see here on component begin overlap. So, but what should we do here? What's going to happen? You see also in my previous blueprint I was setting up before, you can clearly see that I already constructed something, but I want to go through step by step that it really makes sense for you. So basically what we want to say is, hey, when we basically start this overlap collision, we need to trigger something and we need to cast something. So in this particular case, you see it also here very clear. I say cast to a blueprint in this case with my motion controller because it's in VR, right? So you say like cast to a blueprint motion controller and do something. And I explained this also. This is very, very important because I think most of the time it's completely forgotten. When first of all, you will only see the motion controller, the blueprint motion controller, when you launch the level, this template, which is also a free template inside of Unreal, right? It's the free VR template, and you can only launch it and do it when you see also here, like you saw now here the error, right? Because like this wasn't like finished, because for instance here this cast to blueprint motion controller object needs to control other actors. So if you basically click this and compile, now this would be finished. But what I want to show you is very important. It only works when you open that specific level. So if you would open in this VR demo anything else that has not the VR template in it and something else, then you will not find the motion controller blueprint. So you see here the virtual reality blueprint motion controllers are basically here, right? They're already pre-set up. They of course they contain a lot of functions and parameters because with that you want to control everything. But that's not very important for you because it's already preset, right? And you don't need to worry about this. But what is important for you is that you can cast this action now to this specific motion controller. And this is exactly how you do it, right? So in case, again, I'll show you. So if you click like cast to blueprint motion controller, and as you can see, this is where you have to cast it over here, right? Again, cast to blueprint motion controller, click it. This is your controller because you want to use this as an action, and you click here on other actor. You will only find this if you use the VR template, for example. Okay, if you don't use the VR and it's not controlled by the motion controller, you can set then different keys you want to bind it to, or like if you're using a gamepad or whatever, like on a game controller, the XYZ buttons, whatever, right? But in this particular case, it's very, very important. We're using the motion controller to navigate and to basically push a button. That's why you have to cast it to this. So what is next? Once we understand this, we basically can't even control any action. The next thing is that we say, all we want to do is we want to physically create an animation that the actor inside or the user inside gets actually a visibility or a visual response that once he pushed the button, he can clearly see that he pushed the button, right? Because if it just stays static and you want to use it inside of your VR experience, you don't even know, did he push a button? Did he not push a button? Or was the button broken? Etc. So what you want to do is, What you can also see here, like in the event graph, this is basically also the template I give you, which you can download, of course, for free at fattybull.com. You get all my blueprints for free, all my levels and project files. So you can also change it and customize it for your own needs. But when you see this here, the button, then you can clearly see there's nothing else that I can basically go in and drag and drop the collision out here, and can basically say, hey, I wanna do something with the button. So in this particular case, I mean, you can see you can drag and drop to the event graph whatever you want. You can drag and drop, for instance, the collision itself. You could drag and drop the cube. But in my specific case, I want to animate the button itself. So that means that gray button, what you see here on the left side, I want to animate this down and up. That's why I'm selecting the sphere button and drag and drop it onto my event graph. And here on my event graph, as you can see here as well, how I did it, I said, look, something needs to happen. And I want to make sure that this button basically moves to a component. So what I do is I drag it out and then say like move to component. I move the component to. And as you can see, this basically says, wait a minute, I get XYZ coordinates. As you know, everything in 3D space has always XYZ coordinates, right? So you have XYZ in the transform nodes, in the location, in the rotation, and in the scale. All right, so we want to know where this button is. So first of all, in XYZ position, we want to get the relative transform node, right? And as you can see, once you have the relative transform node, you can also split up those values, right, by right mouse click on those values and then say split struct pin. And then you can see that you have location, rotation, and scale. So again, those are always the same components: location, rotation, and scale, as you can see. And now what you want to do is, C is up and down. You want to then basically specify and say like, okay, how much should that sphere actually be animated? That's all what you want to do. So what you have to do is the rotation is connected to rotation. That's all what we want to do. But if I want to now basically animate my location, I have to get somehow some data. And you get this by vector minus vector. So if you type this in, then you can clearly see I'm getting now my vector information on X, Y, and Z of that specific component. And let's say you want to move and animate this button, which is nothing than the sphere here, 10 units down, or 10 units down would be by 10. And if you do this now and you connect it to the target relative location, it will change it. And it will change it, as you can see, move this component over time. You can also see here a time element in 0.2 seconds, 10 units down. Okay, so if you compile this, then you understand that, wait a minute, all we did in here is nothing else than animating the spherical button in the in-game, right? So to speak, 10 units down. All right, so let's zoom out here a little bit and see exactly what we did. We have here basically nothing else than the component animation saying like, hey, take my sphere, change the transform node, the XYZ position, and then move the component. And most of the time here, it can get already very confusing because people say, and I can't see anything. You know, if I click the play button or if I click run simulate, actually nothing is happening. And it's true because we're still missing something. It's very important. First of all, as you can see, the sphere button here needs to be the actual component. That means the component has an input node and that isn't specified. So what you have to do is drag and drop the sphere to the component and make sure that, hey, the sphere is actually my component I would like to move. Okay, very important. So let me make this large here that you can see it on your screen, even better. So this is very, very important. Again, let's digest this a little bit. You see here is my sphere. That is the component I want to do something, and I want to basically move my component to a different location. We got the relative transform nodes in the XYZ position from that component, and then we say, hey, basically change the vector Z component and move it up with 10 units, or move it down with 10 units in this particular case. Keep the rotation as it is, and that's about it, okay? And one more thing here in the function, you see also, you want to move it, you have the time, of course, a floating value time, meaning saying in what specific time you would like to do this move and the animation, right? And we basically say like in 0.2 seconds. Now, still, if you would compile and save this, let's have a look. Is there something in the simulation you can see and it's working? No, it isn't working. Why? Because you still need to start the event. So, of course, still the motion controller isn't connected, but forget about this right now. If you want to test it without the motion controller in the viewport, all you need is basically event begin play. And you need to say, you know what, I want to test it from here. I want to see now if my animation is actually working or if it's not working. So now you have set up everything you need. If you click simulate, boom, you see the simulation is running, and you saw in 0.2 seconds that specific sphere was basically jumping down. Again, in terms of materials, you can always go back here in your container of your blueprint, also select your sphere. I move this out here, and then you can see you have here all the information and the details, and you can make all those changes, whatever you want to do. So if you want to assign here a different material, then you can just drag and drop maybe this pink here to the material slot, and now you have this component in here, and there we go. So again, if you are simulating this simple animation, going back here to the original one, which I showed you here from scratch, then you can see if you run the simulation that if you pause it, make this large here, stop it, and then go back, then you can see that the sphere is actually doing what we have been programming. So you click simulate, boof, in 0.2 seconds it snapped down, you stop it, you simulate it, boof, you can see that would be the simulation of a push button effect, so to speak, in-game when using the VR hands. Now this is just the visual representation, of course, right, for the user, that he can clearly see I pushed the button and something happened, right? But what is next? You maybe want to say, okay, I want to make sure that this simulation, that this animation looks a little bit nicer. The button is pushed, I pushed it down, and then it should jump back, right? So this is very simple, because the only thing you need to do right here is nothing else than you can say, you know what, I can copy this whole thing. So I select all my components, Control C, and then click over here and Control V for paste it again. And then all you want to do is you want to say, you know what, I want to make sure that this button, the sphere or whatever, is animated back in C with 10 units. So -10, and then it should jump back. And this happens right after this component transition or simulation or animation, however you want to call it, happened. So you connect it here, and now it runs from the event begin play, and it jumps basically down. This is the first action, and then we have the second move to component, and it should jump back. And let's test it, compile it, and save. And when you run now simulate, as you can see, it was going down and up, and run and simulate again, going down and up. So this is basically the visual representation. Now, I also told you, and you can see it in the initial setup here as well, that later on you need to connect that event, of course, with the motion controller. That means what you see here, the event begin play, is actually something you want to remove, and then instead you want to connect, so to speak, the Blueprint motion controller, right? Because this Blueprint motion controller is your virtual hand. It's all connected, and then if the collision happens, this is basically what the collision triggers, is the hand touching the collision object. You want to start this component. This is very, very important to understand, because you need to delete them later on or break the link, right mouse click and break the link, and not start the event here, because everything starts over here, okay? So, but in order to see that, I wanted to make sure that you understand it and also have it here set up. So now you just have a visual animation that basically looks like when you use a motion controller, the button goes down and it goes up. But what we didn't specify is what should happen next, okay? So this is all the animation part, the visual representation. And at the very end, we can actually say, do something else and create something. And in my specific case, I basically say, you know what, open a level. And I say, load a different level. And as you can see, this level here I called level sphere. The reason why is I popped in a super large sphere, right? And if you do it right, then I created another level. You can see then here, and I call it level cone. And in my other level is a cone included. It's a different level, completely saved separately. It's an independent level, but you have to then type in, hey, open the level underscore cone. And you have to be very careful here. This is also case sensitive. So the naming of your level needs to be 100% correct. Otherwise, it cannot find this specific level. So as you can see, that was it. Now, if we trigger the simulation, you can see that because we're not inside of the game and I'm not using my virtual hand to basically trigger that button. But what you can see, it jumps from the level of the sphere to the level of the cone. So watch it again, because we are starting this event here and just running a simulation and test it. And it goes through all this. And, you know, after this animation is done, it opens this new level. Watch it again. I know it goes quick, but you can see here is the sphere as a test. And if you run the simulation, poof, you can see. And what's also funny and very clear to see is the difference of those two levels. Because in this level, I created and added those blueprint elements, and here's the sphere. And if I'm opening now the level cone, and I save all this, what I did here, you can see the level cone is different. It's a different level. I don't have the blueprints here, and it obviously, because I call it like this, has the level cone in it. So for what reason is this really good, and what is it good for? Why is this cool to be used? Because again, let's say if you have a specific function or an option inside of your game, and let's say a player clicks basically this button, then you can either animate something else is being triggered or is happening, and you can keep going here in the animation process in your blueprint. But you can also say, you know what, I created already a different level and I want to showcase something, and I want that if you push this button, a different level is being loaded. So again, you can see it here in action. It works, boof, and everything is fine. And if you would take this blueprint right now for your VR template, all you would need to do is, in order to run it, you would basically break the link here from event begin play and then plug it into move component from your motion controller, and then you have it set up. So I hope this was useful. Again, if you would like to download this blueprint and the whole project file, you find it for free on my website to download. It's fedible.com. Yeah, if you think this was useful, please subscribe and also add the thumbs up button. That's going to help me as well a little bit. And if you would like to download all the free project files, etc., jump over to my website, fedibull.com. Under resources, you find a lot of tutorials, but you can also basically download those project files for free. And if you want to talk to me, then join my Slack channel. It's fedibull.slack.com, and this is where we can talk and communicate, of course, and stay in touch. So that's about it from my side. I wish you all the best. Happy developing and have fun, whatever you're doing in Unreal for virtual production. Take care and talk to you later. Bye bye.